The music had barely started when Duke Alaric Thornwood felt a hand grip his arm too tightly. Lady Priscilla Ashford was smiling, but her fingers dug into his sleeve like claws. "You have not danced with a single lady tonight," she said, her voice sharp beneath the sweetness. Alaric pulled his arm free, his jaw tight. Around him, the ballroom glittered with candlelight and jewels, but none of it moved him. He had rejected every woman his mother paraded before him this season, and tonight would be no different. He turned away from Priscilla without another word, ignoring the whispers that followed him like smoke. His mother, the Dowager Duchess Eleanor, caught his eye from across the room and gave him a look that promised a stern conversation later. Alaric sighed and drifted toward the edge of the hall, away from the crush of silk gowns and powdered faces. He needed air, needed distance from the endless performance of courtship. It was then, near the refreshment table, that he noticed her. A young woman moved quietly among the guests, collecting empty glasses with careful, practiced hands. She wore a plain gray dress, nothing like the extravagant gowns around her, yet she carried herself with a quiet grace that no jewel could buy. Her dark hair was pinned back simply, and her eyes stayed low, focused on her work. She did not look up at the nobles, did not seek their attention. She simply worked, steady and calm, as if the chaos of the ball did not touch her at all. Alaric found himself watching her longer than he meant to. There was something different about her stillness, something honest in the way she moved through a room full of pretense. He had spent the entire evening surrounded by women trying too hard to impress him, yet this girl, who wanted nothing from him at all, was the only person who had truly caught his attention. Just then, a drunken lord stumbled backward, knocking a tray from her hands. Glasses shattered across the floor, and the lord turned on her at once, his voice booming with anger. "Clumsy girl, do you know how much that crystal cost?" The girl's face paled, but she said nothing, quickly kneeling to gather the broken pieces before anyone could see her hands trembling. Alaric moved before he could think it through. "The fault was yours, my lord," he said, his voice cutting cleanly through the noise. "You stumbled into her, not the other way around." The room fell silent. The drunken lord opened his mouth to argue, then saw the look on the duke's face and thought better of it. He muttered an apology and staggered away. Alaric knelt beside the girl, helping her gather the last of the broken glass. Up close, he saw her eyes for the first time, clear and startled, meeting his for only a moment before dropping again. "Thank you, your grace," she whispered, her voice soft but steady. He nodded once, said nothing more, and watched her hurry away toward the kitchens. For the rest of the night, Alaric could not stop thinking about her. He did not know her name. He did not know anything about her at all. But something in him had shifted, quietly and completely, the moment their eyes had met. The kitchens of Thornwood Manor were loud and hot, filled with the clatter of pots and the shouting of cooks preparing for the next day's meals. Alara moved through it all with quiet efficiency, her arms full of dishes, her mind still replaying the moment from the night before. She had not expected the Duke to defend her. Men of his rank rarely noticed servants at all, let alone spoke up for them. She tried to push the thought away as she worked, but it lingered, stubborn and strange. Alara had no family name worth mentioning, no fortune, nothing but her hands and her determination. Her parents had died when she was young, leaving her to care for her grandmother, a frail woman with a weak heart and a stubborn spirit. Alara worked long hours at Thornwood Manor, sending most of her wages home, keeping only enough to survive. She did not have time for foolish thoughts about dukes. Yet the very next afternoon, as she carried linens down a quiet corridor, she nearly collided with Alaric himself. He caught the basket before it fell, steadying it with one hand. "We meet again," he said, a faint smile touching his mouth. Alara stepped back quickly, bowing her head. "Forgive me, your grace, I did not see you." "There is nothing to forgive," he said. "I was the one walking without watching where I stepped." He studied her for a moment, and Alara felt her cheeks warm under his gaze. "What is your name?" he asked. "Alara, your grace." "Alara," he repeated, as though testing the sound of it. "You handled yourself well last night, Many would have wept or made excuses. You simply did your work. There was no reason to weep, she said quietly. The glasses were replaceable. My position is not. Something in her answer seemed to please him, though she could not say why. He nodded slowly and stepped aside to let her pass, but not before saying, I hope we speak again, Ilara. She hurried away without responding, her heart pounding in a way she did not fully understand. Over the following days, Alaric found reasons to visit the kitchens and servant halls more often than any duke should. He asked after the meals, inquired about household matters, lingered near the doorways where Ilara worked. At first, she believed it was simply his habit, nothing more. But slowly she began to notice the way his eyes searched for her the moment he entered a room, the way his questions always seemed to lead back to her. One evening, she found him waiting near the garden gate as she finished her duties. You should not be here, Your Grace, she said, glancing around nervously. Someone might see. Let them see, he said simply. I am tired of pretending to care about things that do not matter, Ilara. You are the first honest conversation I have had in years. She wanted to argue, to remind him of the enormous distance between a duke and a servant girl. But the sincerity in his voice silenced her protests, and for the first time in a long while, Ilara allowed herself to simply listen, and to hope, even though she knew hope was dangerous for someone like her. Their meetings became a quiet ritual neither of them spoke about aloud. A few stolen minutes in the garden after her duties ended, a conversation exchanged in the library while she dusted shelves he pretended needed attention, a walk along the edge of the estate where no one else wandered. Ilara learned that Alaric was not the cold, unmoved duke the nobility believed him to be. He was thoughtful, curious, and tired of a life built entirely on appearances. In turn, she told him about her grandmother, about the small house where she grew up, about the fear of losing everything if she ever lost her position. Alaric listened without judgment, something no nobleman had ever offered her. You speak of hardship as though it shaped you. He said one evening, not broke you. It did both, Ilara admitted, but I would rather be shaped than pitied. He smiled at that, a real smile, unguarded and warm. I have never met anyone like you, Ilara. She wanted to believe him, but doubt crept in constantly. She reminded herself again and again that dukes did not marry servant girls. Whatever this was between them, it could not last. Yet despite her warnings to herself, she found herself waiting for their meetings each day, treasuring the sound of his voice, the honesty in his eyes. One night, as rain fell softly outside the manor, Alaric found her in the empty library, sorting old letters by candlelight. He sat across from her without invitation, watching the flickering light dance across her face. I do not care what anyone says about this, he said quietly. I care about how I feel when I am near you. Ilara's hand stilled over the letters. You should care, she whispered. Your mother, your title, everything you have built depends on choices I cannot make for you. Then let me make the choice, he said firmly. I am tired of being told who I must love based on birth and fortune. I know what I feel, Ilara, and it is not fading. She looked up at him, torn between fear and longing, unable to find the words to answer him. Outside, the rain grew heavier, and inside, something between them grew stronger, undeniable and impossible to ignore any longer. It did not take long for whispers to spread through Thornwood Manor. Servants noticed the Duke lingering near the kitchens too often. Guests noticed his sudden disinterest in every eligible lady presented to him. Soon, the gossip reached the Dowager Duchess, who summoned Alaric to her private chamber with fury blazing in her eyes. Tell me it is not true, she demanded. Tell me you have not lost your senses over a servant girl. Alaric did not deny it. Her name is Ilara, he said calmly, and I will not apologize for caring about her. Eleanor's fury only deepened. She threatened, pleaded, and warned him of the scandal that would surely follow. But Alaric remained unmoved, more determined than he had been about anything in years. Meanwhile, Lady Priscilla, humiliated by his rejection, saw an opportunity in the rumors. She spread cruel lies about Alara among the household staff, accusing her of trickery, of manipulating the Duke for her own gain. The other servants, fearing for their own positions, began to distance themselves from Alara, whispering behind her back, treating her with cold suspicion. The housekeeper, pressured by Priscilla's influence and fearing the Duchess's wrath, informed Alara that her services would no longer be needed. "It is nothing personal," the housekeeper said, avoiding her eyes, "but it is for the best for everyone." Alara felt her world crumbling around her. She thought of her grandmother, dependent on the wages she sent home each month. She thought of Alaric, whose reputation was being tarnished simply because he had shown her kindness. Guilt weighed heavily on her chest, and she made a decision she believed was right, even if it broke her heart. She would leave Thornwood Manor before dawn, disappearing quietly, sparing Alaric from further scandal, and protecting what remained of her own dignity. She packed her few belongings with trembling hands, tears slipping silently down her cheeks as she prepared to walk away from the only happiness she had known in years. Alaric discovered her plan almost too late. A young stable boy, loyal to Alara, rushed to inform him that she intended to leave before sunrise. Alaric's heart pounded with panic as he raced through the dark corridors of the manor, refusing to let her vanish from his life without a fight. Alaric found her near the estate gates, her small bag clutched tightly in her hands, the first light of dawn barely breaking over the horizon. "Alara, wait," he called, breathless from running. She turned, startled, tears still visible on her face. "You should not have come," she said softly. "I am only causing you trouble, Your Grace. Your family, your title, everything is at risk because of me." "None of that matters if I lose you," Alaric said firmly, closing the distance between them. "I do not care what my mother thinks, or what Priscilla whispers, or what the entire nobility believes. I care about you, Alara, more than I have ever cared about anything in my life." She shook her head, torn between hope and fear. "A duke cannot marry a servant. It is not how the world works." "Then I will change how the world works," he said, taking her hands in his. "I refuse to spend my life pretending to be happy with someone I do not love, simply because tradition demands it. You are honest, kind, and stronger than anyone I have ever known. That is worth more than any title or fortune." Word of their confrontation spread quickly, drawing a small crowd of curious servants and even the Dowager Duchess herself, who arrived just in time to hear her son's declaration. Alaric turned to face his mother without hesitation. "I am choosing Alara," he said clearly, his voice steady and unshaken. "Not because it is expected, but because it is right." Alina stared at her son, searching his face for any sign of doubt, finding none. Slowly, her expression softened, years of watching him remain empty and unmoved by every noblewoman finally giving way to understanding. "You truly love her," she said quietly, more statement than question. "With everything I have," Alaric answered. Turning back to Alara, he knelt before her, ignoring the gasps of the small crowd gathering around them. "Marry me, Alara, not as a duke choosing a servant, but as a man choosing the woman who has shown him what honesty and real affection truly look like." Tears streamed freely down Alara's face as she nodded, unable to find words strong enough to answer him. Alaric rose and pulled her into his arms, holding her as though he would never let go again. The wedding that followed was unlike any the nobility had witnessed before. Alara walked down the aisle not as a servant elevated by luck, but as a woman who had earned her place through courage and honesty. The very nobles who once whispered cruel judgments about her now watched in silence, forced to witness a love stronger than the traditions they had clung to for so long. Lady Priscilla, humiliated by the outcome, quietly left the estate, never to trouble Alara again. The household staff, who once distanced themselves out of fear, now welcomed Alara warmly, proud to call her their Duchess. Alara's grandmother, brought to the manor for the ceremony, wept with joy as she watched her granddaughter transform from a girl clearing glasses into a woman standing proudly beside the Duke. Alaric held Ilara's hand throughout the ceremony, his eyes never leaving hers, a quiet promise passing between them that no scandal or tradition could ever break. As the sun set over Thornwood Manor that evening, casting warm golden light across the grounds, Alaric and Ilara stood together, finally free from the weight of expectation and gossip. Their story, once dismissed as impossible, became a lasting reminder that true worth was never measured by birth or fortune, but by the honesty and strength found within a person's heart.